For students across the United Kingdom, it's a big day, and a successful day for many. A-level results for England, Wales and Northern Ireland have reached a record high, with 44.8% getting A star or A. In Scotland, the pass rates for Highers and Nationals dropped slightly, but scores still well above pre-pandemic levels. And more than 200,000 students are getting vocational BTEC results. England's Education Secretary Gavin Williamson told Nick Ferrari at breakfast that grade inflation would not devalue the grades.
I think that sort of both employers, I think universities can have real confidence in terms of the resilience and the strength of these youngsters who are sort of coming through, the amount of work that's gone into that. I mean, I've seen it myself with my own daughter who's coming up to her GCSEs, grading on sort of Thursday. And, you know, I've seen sort of firsthand the immense amount of work that's gone in there, and actually a sort of a level of work during the sort of pandemic and when schools have been locked down that probably, I dare I say, was a much higher work rate than maybe either you or I, or certainly that I put in, Nick.
You may well be wondering, what now? What are my options with the results I've got? Well, throughout the hour, Diana Beach is here to help. She is Chief Executive of London Higher, an umbrella organisation representing universities in London. You can call 0345 6060 973. You might be a parent with questions about the system these days and how to help your child navigate what's next. Or if they're your results, they might not be exactly what you were hoping for and you're wondering what your options are. Or perhaps you're spoiled for choice. You can call and ask Diana Beach. The number 0345 6060 973. These grades have been decided by teachers after exams had to be cancelled again because of COVID. A record number of students have also got their first choice university. But if you're wondering what to do next, are you eyeing your first choice? Are you looking around? Maybe you're thinking about that gap year or two. 0345 6060 973 and Diana Beach will do her best to help. We'll hear from Diana in just a moment. First, Isabel Nisbet, who is an affiliated lecturer at the Faculty of Education at the University of Cambridge and was the first CEO of Ofqual. Welcome to the programme. What do you make of these grades?
Thank you. What I make of the grades is that they're well deserved. It's been a very strange year, and last year was strange too. And these young people have had a really tough time. And these grades reflect the teachers' professional assessment of their work, and I think they deserve them. I think there are some questions about the system for the future, but I think those are questions for tomorrow, really. The key thing for today is that people who are trying to denigrate the grades that the young people have achieved are wrong. They do deserve them, and they're fair.
How do we know that they're fair?
They're fair because the teachers were instructed to go through a process where each teacher's assessment had to be checked with another teacher. There was material from exam boards. The exam boards, and regulated by Ofqual, looked at the systems they were applying. And all the information is that those were done very professionally and well. What is the case is it's a rather different way of judging students from the traditional exams, and you can't expect a continuity of results. I just think that these 2 years are different from the long-term time sequence, and I think they should be seen as different.
And so does it make it different for this particular day, which does come around every year, and thousands of students suddenly have to think about what their options are? Sometimes they get more options as a result of their grade, sometimes it's fewer. The very fact that this is a little different, does that mean today is different for some people?
It is in some ways, and it isn't in others. In England, the students found out their grades today. In Wales and Northern Ireland, they'd had some understanding of what they were proposed to be. But the key thing is that 400,000 odd have got into their first choice of university. They've got the grades they needed, and they're able to do what they wanted to do. And that is really good news, and that's big, big numbers. What is different is that there may be some pinch points with some highly selective courses that wanted very high grades if they've got more students getting these high grades than they normally have. But that's for a small number, but it's really important for people who are in that small number. But I think that this year should work out. If a student is really unhappy, they should talk to their school about whether they should appeal. But most, I think, will feel that they've got a fair judgment of the work that they've done at a very difficult time.
You said this was a question for tomorrow, so please forgive me for asking it. But is it possible that 2020 and 2021, and hopefully no future years, but let's see how we get on with the pandemic, will just be seen by employers and others as being out of kilter and odd?
It's early days to answer that, but I think there are really difficult questions that the regulators and informed by the policies of the governments are going to have to consider. It's what do we do about grading standards for the after COVID? And that doesn't mean just there'll be suddenly a day when COVID stopped. There's going to be a gradual process. Can you peg them back in some way? And is that fair on the first group of students who've got the pegged back grades? You can imagine how they might feel. And also remember that the people sitting a year from now will not have had the same amount of teaching and learning in their first year as would normally be expected. So it's a really difficult judgment. And there's also a question of whether the COVID experience is going to encourage us perhaps to think a bit more critically about what's the best way to assess the students in the future. It might not be sitting in a hall, writing with a pen for 3 hours. I don't know when you last did that, but I'm afraid it's a long time since I have. So, maybe we need to, in the same way as we've had to think again about meetings and, buying online and travel and everything and work, maybe we just need to think about education a little bit differently too.
Very good to see you. Thank you. Isabel Nisbet, affiliated lecturer at the Faculty of Education at the University of Cambridge and was the first CEO of Ofqual, raising some very interesting questions about the future of exams and how they should work. Right now, though, I'm keen to hear from you if you are looking at your results and thinking, OK, what next? It may be very clear cut for you. Maybe you're spoiled for choice. Or perhaps things haven't quite gone your way. We do this every year. These circumstances this year, once again, very unusual, as Isabel Nisbet was saying. If you are looking for some help and advice from people who know the system, you can call now and ask Diana Beach. The number is 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Let's hear from Diana now, Chief Executive of London Higher, an umbrella organisation representing universities in London. Welcome, and give me your overview, if you would, first, of all of these impressive grades.
Hello, Eddie, and thank you for the invitation on this show. Can I just start by congratulating everybody who has got results today, be they A-levels, BTECs or Scottish Higher. You have done exceptionally well in very difficult circumstances, so you should be really proud of what you have achieved. And I think today's results are a credit to you all. As you've already explained, there's record numbers of students getting their first choice university. There are record numbers of A grades, and London in particular has done very, very well, with 47.9% of Londoners securing an A or an A star. And that is very much, as our previous speaker, Isabel said, credit to your work. And it's not grade inflation at all. It's been marked by your teachers, and you should be very, very proud. As far as universities are concerned, there are still places. If you didn't get the grades that you want, we'll talk a little bit about this later, I'm sure. But please just phone your institution that you wanted to go. There are very helpful advisors there who can talk you through your options.
How different do you think this year is as a result of these very good grades that we're seeing?
I mean, it's obviously different to previous years, but I don't want the students themselves to feel it's different. Just like the previous speaker says, there's much the same and there's much that has changed. So the procedure remains the same. If you haven't got your grades, phone up clearing. There are options there. Nobody wants to be thought of as the COVID generation. And I'm sure over time that will sort of elapse as well. The main thing is we're concentrating now, institutions across the sector are concentrating in getting people into the places that they want to go to and which they deserve.
I'm looking at a report in The Guardian which says that students with places at oversubscribed medical schools in England are being asked to move to a course at a university elsewhere in the country in exchange for £10,000 after a surge in applications was followed by hundreds more students than expected meeting their grade offers.
Yes, I've just caught up on the news on that myself. So that, yes, medicine is a highly selective course, and it's no coincidence, I think, over the pandemic that we've seen a surge of appeal for health-related courses. People want to go back and give something to that community effort. And that's translated into the number of students that want to take these courses. But of course, it's not just about getting into university, it's making sure we've got the medical placements as well to enable students to go out, to get their clinical placements and to complete their courses. Now, these are spread out across universities across the country. So each university gets only a small proportion of these. Some are already oversubscribed. These are some of the more established names in the sector, but there are many new medical schools with places very much the same quality waiting to be filled. So again, if you find yourself on one of these oversubscribed courses, do phone up your institution and they will be able to advise you.
Do you have a view, by the way? There's been a lot more debate today, in part because of something Gavin Williamson said this morning about what the next term should look like. This suggestion, and we've heard it from many listeners over the months who have been unhappy about online lectures being pretty much all they get. Would you like to see a rebate for students next term if there is no return to quote unquote normality?
Well, I know universities across the sector are really planning on an in-person, face-to-face experience as much as is possible next term. There are some elements, however, of the past year which we can take forward, the positive elements, like some students benefit from being able to watch a lecture back in their own time. They don't need to be there live in the room. Those kind of elements can be taken forward as a good thing. But I know universities and colleges are preparing this term for those essential elements to be in person. So there's small person tutorials, seminars, practical lab experiences, etc. So I think we can take the best of both worlds forward.
All right, are you ready for all these calls, texts and tweets that are going to be thrown at you?
Yeah, let's see what we can do.
OK, stand by. That is Diana Beach, Chief Executive of London Higher. If you have a question, a query, a concern, a worry, having got your results, or maybe you're spoiled for choice, maybe you're taking the 10 grand, you can call, text or tweet. You can phone 0345 6060 973, text 84850, tweet at LBC. Whether you're a student, perhaps you're a parent wondering how best to help, same number, 0345 6060 973. Tim Humphrey now at 4:15 with the LBC News. It's a big day, A-level results, BTEC, hires and nationals. If you have a question about your future, what to do now with your options, perhaps your child, well, you don't think of them as children anymore, perhaps your offspring who you've helped through their life so far is wondering what to do now. It's 0345 6060 973 and Diana Beach, Chief Executive of London Higher, will do her best to help. Robbie first in Streatham. Hi, Robbie. What do you want to say?
Oh, good afternoon. Am I addressing Diana Beach?
You are. You're addressing Eddie and Diana.
Oh, right. Oh, yes, I should include you as well.
Thanks. Very sweet.
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, the question that I want to ask is that under the present conditions of COVID-19 and the fact that the students or the children at school have not had to take exams under the normal conditions and are being judged by self-assessment, do you think it might be in order to have an entrance, a small or short entrance exam for university before they enter to ensure that their abilities are commensurate with the course that they're going to start?
Well, because they haven't had the pressure of the exam itself.
Indeed, yeah.
All right, Diana.
Hi, Robbie, and thanks for your question. I think it's worth pointing out just to start that although this year's students haven't taken physical exams, there are lots of exams that they have taken throughout the year which inform the student grades. And when they apply to universities, those are taken into account, as well as other things such as their personal statement that they put on their UCAS application form. And some courses like performing arts already have sort of a portfolio which students submit beforehand. So there is already an element of extra assessment there. For some of the more in-demand courses such as medicine, dentistry, veterinary science, and also courses at Oxbridge, they already have a sort of internal filtering interview process as well. I'm not going to say this will become standard across the board because many universities already take into account the other things that I've mentioned, so the internal school exams, personal statements and portfolio as well. So I don't see this as yet becoming the norm.
Robbie, what do you think?
Well, the reason I ask that question is because on shopping trip, I have no children of my own, that are attending school or anything, or any children at all, actually. But I'm extremely interested in education. And in my travels, many of the students working behind the counters, I ask questions to, and I come across students that are doing things like hotel and tourism courses. And I will ask them a question such as, do you know the capital of Australia? And 99% of them will get it wrong by telling me it's either Sydney or Melbourne, which I find a little disappointing. I also have a financial background, and I ask students that are studying business studies and to determine whether they are learning well. And some of the questions I ask them, they are unable to answer, even though they're first-year students at university. And yet again, that disturbs me. So that is the reason why I'm asking the questions that I'm asking.
Diana, what do you say?
Under the heat of the moment, like I am now, I'm sure I would struggle sometimes to answer questions like that off the cuff. Students are taught in the round, and at the end of their 3 or 4 years degrees, traditional sort of full time, they will acquire the knowledge that is needed for the sectors and industries that they want to go into. Quality builds up over time, and I do think that our universities are churning out the graduates that our businesses need.
Robbie, thank you for the question. 0345 6060 973 on this big day for exam results. Suddenly, new options might be opening up for you, or they might be closing down. Diana is an expert. She'll do her best to help. You can also text 84850. Christian is in Leeds. Hi, Christian.
Hello. I just wanted to ring up really, as I've not got any children myself, but I'm a teacher. I'm a senior leader at a school in the north of England, and I just wanted to see from a higher education's point of view if you would agree that students should actually be reassured that whatever is written and said, and even with the previous caller, there seems to be a constant almost critique of young people and what they know and how they are, that even when they achieve and they achieve well, there's this undercurrent of, oh, well, there must be a reason why they've overachieved now. Do you think that students should actually be reassured, and yourself as an institution, that it's the process as much as the actual examination at the end that really counts? Because we all know how examinations work. It's a pin in the map at that time. It could be 3 subjects that, were revised more or less than others. What's happened now is that students have been taught content and assessed on that content rigorously, and they've been given the opportunity to sort of achieve. And I think we should be celebrating that. And in that context of celebration, can we take what's best about this system, amend it, and then would you be in favour of maybe rolling this out more permanently as a way of really assessing what students know, rather than the randomness of an exam, which we all know doesn't always prepare or show students off in their best light?
Well, that's lots of interesting points there, Christian, and one of them was already addressed in a sense by Isabel Nisbet, who was with us earlier, and thought we do need to have a think about the future of exams and how they work. Anyway, I'll stop rabbiting. Diana, you're the expert.
Thank you. And thanks, Christian. There's a lot in there to unpack. And before I start, can I just thank you on behalf of the higher education sector as well for your work with these students over the past a year or so in getting them to where they are today, and for working with them at this particularly difficult time. I do absolutely agree that this is a time to celebrate successes. And it's not just about the grades on the piece of paper at the end of the day. It is about the entire student journey, that learning process. It's about expanding your knowledge, but growing as a person as well. And, this year's students have had 2 years worth of disruption, the A-level, Scottish Higher and BTEC. They've learned a lot personally over that time. They've developed resilience, confidence in a way that perhaps we didn't in our day. So there's a lot there to be celebrated and for employers to recognise in the future. And of course, yes, that can be measured in different ways. And I know universities, when it goes through the system, are already experimenting with that. It's not just about sit-down exams at the end of the day. There's a coursework component, there's practical components, there's portfolio. And I think as Eddie and Isabel said, it is about experimenting. We are in a new age and a new dawn. And I think now is the time to experiment and see what works best for today's students.
Christian, I'm keen to pick your brain too. What do your students think of going to university? How much of a goal is that for them?
Well, in our current context, university is one of the main sort of aspirations. However, I do think that we need to broaden, what it is perceived to be as the next steps in education, because university isn't always appropriate. But I do think that a lot of what sort of influences young people and how they perceive learning and is the way in which they are assessed. And I think that the high stakes examination process isn't fit for purpose anymore. And this is why I was interested to see what the views were from the next stage, if examinations really still are seen as the gold standard of measuring what the student knows and can do, because obviously we don't always go through life regurgitating all the information on Unit 1. We have to apply that knowledge, and actually giving students a chance to apply that knowledge in whichever context it is, surely over a period of time will be the much better, much fairer way of assessing that student. And I think we might have reached somewhere close to that. Obviously, it's not a perfect system, but I've much preferred being able to actually see over time and use different bases of evidence to make an assessment and a judgment of a student, and then have that validated, checked, critiqued, challenged by colleagues and other schools as well. And I think it's something that should be seriously looked into.
Christian, thanks so much for the call. Steve texts to say, as an employer, I would not be happy to employ someone from 2021, as the students have not been stressed by exam conditions, which was, in a sense, part of Robbie's point. Alan at Edinburgh, and this is a question for you, Diana, says, do you think employers still value degrees as much as they used to? Where are all these jobs for our highly educated students?
What a good question. I do think employers still value degrees. And I think the concept of a degree probably means different things to different people. A lot of people would think of that sort of 3-4 year residential experience. That's not a degree today. Degrees come in various shapes and sizes. Some include placement years. Some are very hands-on, practical. Students learn on the job. There's degree apprenticeships, which have just emerged over the past year as well. And I think employers do need to recognise that diversity of experience. And some degrees obviously are vocationally orientated and lead you directly into a job, and they've got employer input from the start. So I do think that they are still valued. Of course, we're in a difficult economic climate at the moment, and it may be more difficult to get a job. But I do think the value of a degree holds its value over time. And it's a degree is a good investment for many students. I mean, over working lives, government data shows that the average male graduate can expect to earn £130,000 more than a peer that didn't go to university, and for women that's £100,000. So of course that value does add up, and that in turn goes into businesses and the Treasury.
All right, thank you. For now, 0345 6060 973 if you want to talk to Diana Beach, Chief Executive of London Higher, on this big day for students across the United Kingdom, A-levels, BTEC, Highers and Nationals. What are your choices now? And we've heard such negative reaction from some employers saying they are not sure about the value of this year's degrees. And they're not sure about the value of this year's A-level results. So if you are one of the students who has got the results today, what do you make of hearing all of that? All of your hard work being instantly devalued and degraded? 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850, tweet at LBC on what sounds like a very successful day for many students. Are you a little tired of hearing that your success is not all it appears to be? 0345 6060 973. Diana Beach with us till 5. Now the news headlines. Tim Humphrey. We're talking exams. Let me just bring you the latest figures on COVID, though, from the UK government ahead of the COVID report from Charlotte Lynch in a moment. The number of deaths reported, 146. That's the highest daily figure since the 12th of March. New cases, 23,000, and vaccinations just under 170,000. Charlotte will have more details on the other COVID headlines in just a moment. Diana Beach, Chief Executive of London Higher, is with us until 5 o'clock. Feel free to pick her brain. And Hassan has called in from Red Hill. Hi, Hassan. Tell me about you.
Hi, Eddie. Hi, Diana. It's really good to hear some, really positive things from Diana. recently about obviously the A-level grades. It's good to have someone who knows what they're talking about, offering support to all the students and stuff. I got my A-level results today. I got 3 A stars and A, so I'm really ecstatic, obviously.
Well done. What are they in?
Maths, further maths, biology and physics.
And what do you want to do? What are your hopes and dreams?
Aerospace engineering, hopefully, and maybe going to Formula One or wherever it takes me.
But sorry, go on. I interrupted you.
So yeah, I was just I'm kind of fed up of people saying that these A levels don't matter or they're not this. Well, obviously they're not the same in the context that obviously COVID-19 has ruined our chance of sitting exams, but people are saying that there should be valued less. They shouldn't be valued less because the assessments and schoolwork that we did during these last 18 to 24 months was still rigorous and still, teachers trying to pick at our brain and make sure that we know what we're talking about, that we are actually capable of achieving our targeted grade. You know what I mean? And hearing people saying that, I won't employ people, or I'd rather not employ people who sat their A-levels in 2020 or 2021 is kind of ridiculous, because at the end of the day, once you sit your degree, your A-levels won't really matter. Employees, to my best knowledge, won't really look at that as the first thing, your A-levels. They're going to look at your degree, what you got a first or 2-1, what university you went to, what work experience you did, if you did a placement year. All these kind of things matter a lot more than A-level results do. And I do believe that a lot of employers will, understand this. So it's kind of upsetting seeing people texting and messaging saying that these kids they got grades that they don't deserve. Did
you hear Robbie call earlier?
I didn't hear Robbie call. No, I was at work.
He was wondering why he sometimes encounters students in shops and so on, and he tests them and asks them whether they know what the capital of Australia is, and he's not always impressed with the results.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, that's general knowledge, though, isn't it? A lot of people don't have general knowledge. A lot of 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 20-year-olds don't have general knowledge. You can't base someone's degree or someone's academic capability off of a capital city. Just because I know the capital of Australia is Canberra doesn't mean that,
Hey, Hassan, there's no need to show off.
Of course, yeah. Sorry, my bad.
Tell me, though, this year, and I don't mean this question to be stupid, this year, did you feel tested? I know you didn't have the exams, but did you feel that you were being stretched and questioned, and the teacher really pushed you? Well, yeah. I mean,
I've always tried to, because there's usually two groups of students. You've got the students who work hard all the time, all the year. And then you've got the students who relax, and then they get C's and D's in their mocks, and then they want to really get themselves going around April, May time. And those students, I guess, couldn't really do that this time. But I felt like I was at my school, at my college, that I was tested, and everybody else was tested at a rigorous level, at a really good level.
Hassan, stay right there. I want to bring Diane, if I may, since she said such nice things about it. Here she is.
Thank you, Eddie. And first off, massive congratulations, Hassan. You have done really, really well. And whichever university and eventual employer you go to will be very, very lucky to have you.
Thanks so much.
I absolutely agree with what you've said. You are part of the generation that has been tested to the max. You've been tested academically, but you've also been tested emotionally and physically. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to keep that motivation going, studying from your bedroom, day in, day out, working remotely, losing that social contact. That takes strength. It takes strength of mind and it takes emotional resilience. And I sincerely hope that employers in the future will recognise that. And I think you're going to be an absolute asset to the next generation.
There you go, Hassan.
Thanks so much. It means a lot. Yeah.
Very nice indeed. Good to hear from you, Hassan, and all the best with whatever comes next for you. This text says, just tell your caller, Robbie, my wife had no formal education and she knows everything. If all else fails, there is Google. 0345 6060 973. Lindsay has been hanging on for a long time. Lindsay, my apologies.
That's all right.
What would you like to say?
Yeah, just laughing at that last comment. If this disrupted hybrid kind of education is producing such fantastic results, is there an argument for continuing it and perhaps having shorter degrees, some online, with intense partying in between, if you have a student experience, and it would save on the costs and it would save on the accommodation costs, and produce what we've obviously produced now, people who are resilient, people who are adaptable, people who have many talents, and not just on taking exams. I mean, just trying to look at it in a completely fresh way and have a rethink.
Lindsay, what about that? I mean, thank you, Lindsay. Diana, you've talked about the vastly varied ways there are of getting a degree, but what about Lindsay's central point that maybe the idea that we would want to return to normal is the last thing we need?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Lindsay, for the question. There is absolutely a new normal now. So over the past year, what we've seen is universities and colleges across the country working tirelessly and investing in new digital systems to provide that sort of remote distance blended learning that Lindsay spoke about. And anecdotally, this is working for students. It works for those kind of students who have to fit their studies around their lives, people who have caring commitments, people who have full-time jobs. It works for those students who are traditionally commuter students and may commute, an hour and a half to campus there and back each day. They save on that time. It also has benefits for the more traditional students who want that sort of face-to-face on-campus experience. But as I mentioned before, you've got lecture capture systems which enable students to rewatch lectures in their own time. That aids with revision. So I think what we're seeing is that new normal. We have to take the best of both worlds. Yes, we take the old world and we bring that on-campus experience back, but we take those bits of that remote digital landscape and we bring those in as well. So I definitely think there is something going forward where we can experiment with sort of a hybrid learning model. And of course, as Lindsay said, that has benefits for those lifelong learning opportunities as well, where you can maybe, hop on, hop off education later in life, do a top-up course. There really is something for everyone, and we must maintain that.
Thank you, Lindsay. 0345 6060 973. Be part of the conversation and pick Diana Beach's brain, Chief Executive of London Hire. Right now, a little later than usual, I brought you the COVID figures a moment ago with tonight's other headlines in the COVID report. Here's LBC's Charlotte Lynch.
Eddie, 3/4 of adults in the UK have now received both doses of a coronavirus vaccine. More than 86.7 million doses have been administered here, and almost 40 million of those are second jabs. The NHS in England has announced that nearly 16,000 16 and 17-year-olds have already received their vaccine over the weekend. Plans for an autumn COVID booster vaccine programme are already underway, although one of the UK's top vaccine experts says it may not be needed. During a hospital visit in Milton Keynes, Health Secretary Sajid Javid has been asked about the programme.
Well, when it comes to booster jabs, we are waiting for the final advice from the JCVI. That's our group of independent clinical advisors. And when we get that advice, we will be able to start the booster programme. But I anticipate it will begin in early September. So I'm already making plans for that. It's really important that when we start that programme, that the sort of first cohorts, the ones that got the jabs early on when we started our programme, the first in the world back in December last year, that those cohorts come first, and so we will be prioritising it.
Professor Sir Andrew Pollard, who played a key role in developing the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, has said any waning of protection provided by the vaccines would be gradual and would be picked up on quickly through UK surveillance systems. He's been answering politicians' questions at a hearing of the all-party parliamentary group on coronavirus.
Even as the levels of immunity start to drop that we can measure in the blood, our immune system still remembers that we were vaccinated and will be remembering decades from now that we had those 2 doses of vaccine. So there isn't any reason at this moment to panic. We're not seeing a problem with breakthrough severe disease. And we have this sort of understanding of the biology that puts us in a good place to know that even if we started to see some waning of protection, that would not be, as we discussed in the last panel, a complete switch off of protection. We're not going to get to the end of September and suddenly find the pandemic starts again.
The latest data for the UK, 23,510 new cases of COVID-19, were recorded in the previous 24 hours. 146 new COVID deaths have been recorded within 28 days of a positive test. That's as the family of a lawyer who died with the virus after refusing to get vaccinated are urging people to get the jab. 58-year-old Leslie Lawrenson had recorded videos sharing his concerns and doubts about its effects days before he passed away in Bournemouth last month. His loved ones say he had a misguided belief that he'd be able to fight COVID-19 naturally, partly due to what he'd seen online. In Germany, leaders are expected to set out new coronavirus regulations for the coming months, including abolishing free testing as an incentive for people to get vaccinated. It's because unvaccinated residents will be expected to have tests as a condition of entry to many indoor gatherings, restaurants and things like church services. And the Pentagon's confirmed that people in the US military will be required to get the coronavirus vaccine. Troops will be expected to have the jab from next month to maintain what's being called military readiness. President Joe Biden has backed the plans.
Charlotte Lynch with the COVID report. We're going to carry on the conversation about exams. Just before the news, here's Kevin. He says, Eddie, I work in a sixth form college, so have a bit of know-how. We had moderation meetings for each and every student so that we could arrive at an accurate grade. It was an exhaustive and extensive process. No stone was left unturned. So please tell the bigots and the lazy and those who only know their prejudices that they're wrong when they lazily and slovenly throw out their insults and clichés at these remarkable young people. 0345 6060 973. More to come right after the news from Tim Humphrey. And on the day of the A-level results, plus BTEC, Highers and Nationals, we have Diana Beach with us, Chief Executive of London Higher, an umbrella organisation representing universities in London. And we have Sharon on the phone. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Eddie.
What do you want to say?
I just feel like I want to defend this particular cohort of students and their results. It's very easy to knock them and to reach for very lazy criticisms. I feel like I'm probably echoing what that previous text message was. But from my experience as a teacher, over the period of time that we were assessing these students, I think it was about 5 to 6 weeks worth, they had 8 to 10 assessed pieces per subject. So you think about how many subjects students actually sit in this day and age. That's a considerable number of assessments. And in some cases, some students went from one assessed piece to another, and that would be repeated across a period of weeks. So actually, this was a hugely stressful time for students, and I think that they coped remarkably well. And I feel that knocking them is a huge disservice to them.
Thank you, Sharon. Here's Tara in Hillingdon. Hi, Tara.
Hi, I just had a question about how the A-levels were conducted this year.
Yeah, sure. Diana Beach is here. Fire away, Tara.
Because different schools use different exams, how do we know that the grades were awarded fairly and that everyone is tested accurately?
And did you go through these assessments yourself?
Yes, I did.
Do you mind telling me a little bit more about what's been happening to you in the last year or so? How old are you, first of all, Tara?
I'm 18.
Okay. Tell me what's been happening in this last year or so.
Well, so because exams were cancelled and then we had to obviously do teacher assessments, and I attend the grammar school, so of course like the exams that we do might be quite difficult, and so I just felt like the exams that we did were quite different to other schools. So we didn't use exam board papers either.
And you're concerned that everybody may not have been tested fairly?
Yeah.
All right, Diana, what do you think?
Well, first off, Tara, congratulations for getting through this. I hope you got the grades you wanted, and you should feel proud. We all recognise the struggle, as the previous speaker, Sharon, said as well, what you've been through. So please do not feel disheartened. I can assure you that every exam in England, yes, there are different exam boards, but they are all moderated and they're all of equal quality. So yes, there might be different set texts, let's say for literature exams or different case studies in science, but they are all at the same level. And of course, you know, we are a country of differences. We have Scotland doing Scottish Highers. Wales have their own sort of version of A-levels, and NI in Northern Ireland as well. But they are all of equal quality, and all of you have done a really good job this year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Here's Ruan now in Brora. Hi, Ruan.
Hi there, my name's Ruan Udwage Prayer from the University of East London, but I live up in the Highlands of Scotland.
Bless you. What do you want to say?
I want to say absolutely huge congratulations to all those who've got through their A levels and higher. And I really want to knock the critics, because certainly those youngsters who are going to go on to university, unless you've been to university, then it's easy to criticise. But those students are going to face a completely different learning experience. And I have huge hope for them. But equally, I want to say a huge thank you and congratulations to my students who have gone through 18 months of the pandemic and the blended approach that we've taken, most of it online. And I've actually handed out, I shouldn't say that. I've actually given some of the highest marks, and they were well earned during this period, than I've ever given in my academic career.
What's it been like? I know you've rightly focused on your students, but what's it been like for you trying to do your job and get them through?
My working day has extended. I work from my office at home. It's now a 10-hour day, 12-hour day. I'm working with students of an evening, weekends, and even today I'm on leave at the moment, and I've been answering student issues at the moment. So my day has increased, as has all of my colleagues. But frankly, the results that I'm getting back from the students and the feedback is worth it, because the good students obviously will always be good, but some of the stories that my students have of experience have been heartbreaking, but still they have stuck to it. And that's going to pay dividends for them in the future, I feel.
Ruan, thanks so much for that. And just before we get a final word from you, Diana, Nav has texted. He says, Eddie, the kids haven't had social lives for 18 months. Surely they should be getting better grades than previous cohorts with nothing to do other than study. Many kids would have benefited from fewer distractions. Also, who is Robbie? Some random guy asking already stressed kids random questions while they're doing other things. I did my A-levels in 2000, and even then there were headlines about slipping standards. Today's students can just ignore the naysayers. Final word to you, Diana.
I can't say it better than the last two guests, to be honest. Once again, I'd just like to congratulate everybody that has got their grades today. Do phone up your chosen university. If you haven't got the grades that you wanted, there will be something for you. And I'd just like to thank all the teachers that we've heard from today and more who have supported the students throughout this period. And of course, my thoughts go out to university admissions teams who are helping these students find the courses that they want.
Busy times. Thanks so much for being with us. Diana Beach, Chief Executive of London Higher, an umbrella organisation representing universities in London. After 6 tonight, William Hague, former Conservative leader, has been talking about drugs, suggesting that today's political leaders might benefit from following what's been happening in Portugal. We'll talk about that, and I want to hear from you on that after 6. Right now, the Steve Allen soundbite of the night.
I can hear buzzing in my ear. I don't know why. What am I listening to? I'm hearing buzzing, which is very strange. Perhaps it's the phone. Perhaps the phone's having one of its days. Can you hear it? I can hear it as well. If you can hear it, no, please don't write in if you can hear it. It doesn't make any difference, actually. It's just I was listening to it thinking, hello, tinnitus again. Something very odd, and I don't know where it's coming from. I'm looking at the thing. No, I'm checking. It's all right, I'm trying to be technical. I don't know. It could be the aircon. I never thought about that. Is it? Don't know. Very strange. Yeah, so it could be a fan, actually. And Henry says, you should have seen the look I got when I asked to swap my chopsticks for a fork.
For students across the United Kingdom, it's a big day and for many a successful day. A-level results for England, Wales and Northern Ireland have reached a record high. In Scotland, the pass rates for Highers and Nationals dropped a bit, with the scores still well above pre-pandemic levels. England's Education Secretary Gavin Williamson told Nick Ferrari at breakfast that grade inflation would not devalue the grades.
I think that sort of both employers, I think universities can have real confidence in terms of the resilience and the strength of these youngsters who are sort of coming through, the amount of work that's gone into that. I mean, I've seen it myself with my own daughter who's coming up to her GCSEs, grading on sort of Thursday. And, I've seen sort of firsthand the immense amount of work that's gone in there, and actually a sort of a level of work during the sort of pandemic and when schools have been locked down that probably, dare I say, was a much higher work rate than maybe either you or I, or certainly I put in, Nick.
Speaking to Sheila Fogarty here on LBC, Simon Liebers from the exam regulator Ofqual defended the practice of teacher-assessed grades.
The idea was to trust teachers' judgment, and the principle that was based on was that teachers were in the best position to know what their students had learned and been taught and were able to do after a period of great disruption in their education. What we were concerned about was the fact that some students would have had very much more disruption than others, that people would have had different and uneven experiences. And in order to accommodate that and make sure that it could be dealt with and that we could give people we could assess people fairly, we built in large elements of flexibility into the arrangement. So that was done by design in order to make it a more flexible system that would reflect the reality that people had very different experiences.
Now reporting for LBC from Lancashire, Alice Schofield.
In the northwest of England, Eddie, nearly 42% of all A-level students have got A's and A stars this year. You could tell that just by speaking to students randomly at Nelson and Cone College in Lancashire.
I'm really happy I got A star in biology and psychology and an A in chemistry.
Yeah, good. A star. So I'm over the moon, really.
I was really nervous. Then I opened my results and found out that I got 3 A stars.
It's been a tough year for students. Their grades have been decided by teachers after exams had to be cancelled again because of COVID. So it's pretty much been 2 years of uncertainty to get to this point right now. Oliver Robinson collected his results this morning and told me this year in particular has been challenging.
I really do value face-to-face teaching, and nothing will ever replace that online or anything like that. I prefer it to happen now as opposed to in my university years that are coming up.
But most students I got to speak to were very pleased with themselves after what has been a week filled with sleepless nights, worrying about what was going to be in that envelope. You could sense the relief in the room as students were busy updating each other with what they got and what their future plans are now. And the next step, well, it's a pretty big one. It's just been revealed that a record number of students have got into their first choice at uni. That includes Holly Smith.
The next step, well, I'm going to Lancaster University to study biology, and then we'll see where it takes me, really.
There's still some concerns about some universities carrying on with online learning when the new term starts in September. The Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, says the government wants them to return to face-to-face teaching. Holly's hoping for that at Lancaster too.
It's that making friends, isn't it? Because that's what you miss out on, so it's a big part. Yes, I'm really happy that it'll be back to normal.
I mean, Afzal is taking a gap year before she starts uni because she doesn't want to risk it right now.
With everything that's going on with COVID, I think it's the right plan to take and just wait again until next year and apply for university then. Gap year, I'm probably going to get a job, my driver's licence, hopefully go on holiday, but I'm not sure with the COVID and everything like that. But hopefully I get to go out a bit and have fun.
So A-level results are at a record high, but I thought I could just end on a bit of a brag by mentioning the fact that girls managed to extend their lead over the boys in getting an A or higher.
Alice Schofield reporting. Some breaking news on LBC. The Governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, has resigned. He is, as I speak, making a live televised address. As you know, for days he has faced allegations about his behaviour with women in his company. He denied wrongdoing, but he has just in the past few moments announced his resignation. We will hear from Simon Marks with more on that in just a moment. Now, more on today's exam results. Reporting for LBC Live from Glasgow, Phil McDonald.
Well, Eddie, in Scotland, close to 137,000 learners received certificates today. And as ever, it's been a day of nerves, joy, and a chance as well for young people to look at their options. These pupils at Lochgelly High School in Fife were just some of those who got the results today, and they've been reflecting on a school year like no other.
We got our results at the end of term because they were our grades from our assessments. So it was still a bit nervous to see if they'd changed or not.
It was all about the unknown. Nobody knew what was happening, what was going to happen. So it was really good to have that confirmation and know that that's it now.
It's a totally different environment being in the exam hall to just being in your classroom. But I think it actually did. It put me more at ease because it wasn't as nerve-wracking walking in. It was an environment you were used to.
Now, those in 5th year and 6th year at Scottish schools achieved a record number of higher and advanced higher passes. Clearly something for young people across the country to be proud of. But the overall pass rate has fallen. So at national high level, it's just under 86%. For higher, it's over 87%. And for advanced higher, it's just above 90%. All down on last year. But Scotland's Education Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville says it's not out of the ordinary.
When we look at the pass rates on historical levels, the rates this year are much higher than they were in 2019 and the years before that. So every very year at this point is different. Obviously these are exceptional circumstances that our young people are going through. When you look at the results this year, they're fair, credible system and a strong set of results.
One concerning takeaway from the results in Scotland, Eddie, is a rise in the attainment gap. The difference in results between those from more deprived backgrounds and from more affluent backgrounds has widened compared to last year. But it's worth pointing out that it is still narrower than it was pre-pandemic. Fiona Robertson leads the Scottish Qualifications Authority, the country's exam board.
There's no doubt that young people across Scotland have faced disruption to learning. We've sought to modify our approaches to assessment to address disruption to learning. We've offered flexibilities around how and when assessments are undertaken and provided support to make sure we get the right results.
Her organisation, the SQA, has come in for much criticism for their running of the examination system, particularly off the back of last year's fiasco. It's due to be replaced by a new agency, in fact. The teaching union, the NESUWT, say the exam board and the Scottish Government's handling of assessments has been chaotic and disjointed. They say schools have done a tremendous job of picking up the pieces, but they say so many teachers were left running on empty at the end of last term with a workload that left them at breaking points. And we know that Scotland's Education Secretary will make an announcement on exam arrangements for next year in due course.
Phil McDonald reporting live from Glasgow. Steve Spriggs is Managing Director of William Clarence Education, a university admissions consultancy. How do all of these figures look to you? Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, they're interesting. No doubt about it, they're the best that there's ever been. And I think there's two major issues here at play. There's the grade inflation that's been well read around today and in previous years, but also the issue of deferment from previous years. I think and this will take quite a few years to actually level out over the next few years going forward. I think the most competitive courses, maybe last year, people look to defer into this year, which has then led to an even more hyper-competitive situation this year. And then further improvement on grades, people are adjusting upwards. People are probably looking at their options for deferring again. And we've already heard a few universities who are offering incentives to do exactly that into different universities or to defer. So, it's a compounding effect over the next 3 or 4 years until we find a nice level.
Competition for places on some courses is huge.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we do a lot of work around the law, medicine, Oxbridge suite, and even the top engineering courses. And that gap between the less selective courses and then the really competitive courses, it's getting more and more competitive at that top end.
How likely is it, you think, that some students will say, all things considered, it's time for my gap year?
Probably pretty likely. I mean, away from the education side, it's been a really tough 18 months. So even without the grades at the moment, you may consider that option. But I think with the results at the moment, if you've overachieved and you can't get a place at that top level university, it might be time for that to consider other options. That may be work experience, or it could be a gap year. And equally so, if you were predicted maybe lower grades, but you then did better, you probably want to reshoot again for next year.
Thank you, Steve. Steve Spriggs, Managing Director of William Clarence Education. Ben Kentish is our Westminster correspondent. Take us through the politics of this, Ben.
Well, it was always going to be a difficult time, I think, for the government, Eddie. Remember last year's fiasco? It really was a fiasco over exam results. That has been avoided this year. It was made pretty clear early on that this was going to be how the grades were allocated. Of course, ministers will understand the fears about grade inflation and all the debates you've been having. But ultimately, they decided very early on this time that this was going to be the best option for allocating grades this year. They hope to go back to exams as normal next year. And that is the basis that they came to this decision on, that there was simply no alternative, given they had to decide, say, 6 months ago, how this was going to work. They needed to give teachers and pupils clarity. They didn't do that very well last year. They've done a better job of it this year. And Gavin Williamson will be relieved, I think, that he's avoided some of the fallout that this period last year entailed.
We were talking the other day on the programme about Lord Bethel, not a household name perhaps, but an important person in government. And at just the moment that some people really wanted to see the contents of his mobile phone and how they might shed light on important government contracts, his phone broke. You've got news of developments.
It did indeed. This is in relation to a judicial review brought by a group of lawyers called the Good Law Project that are looking into the allocation, the giving out of PPE contracts last year, namely last spring. They are alleging that due process wasn't followed, that there were links between ministers and some of the companies that received those contracts, and ultimately that things were not done in a way that you would expect of a government department like the Department for Health and Social Care. Now, Lord Bethel is the minister who was ultimately in charge of awarding those contracts. He is a minister at the Department for Health, and as part of that legal challenge, it is expected that his correspondence with those companies will be disclosed to the court. Problem arises, Eddie, as you say, because, according to government lawyers, many of the messages that Lord Bethel had that he exchanged with those companies are no longer retrievable, at least that's what it appears, because his phone broke. His personal phone, broke, and he replaced it with another one, and that means that those messages cannot be disclosed at this time. Now, the government says they are trying to retrieve them, but what's happened today is in response to a letter from Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner asking the Information Commissioner to investigate Lord Bethel's use of a personal device for government business. The Information Commissioner's office, this is Elizabeth Denham, she's the Information Commissioner, has confirmed that yes, it will do that. It will be part of its investigation into how the Department for Health used personal phones, personal computers, to conduct what appears to be government business, and whether that was or was not in keeping with the rules. Angela Rayner saying discussing millions of pounds of taxpayer-funded contracts on a private device is unacceptable. Every effort needs to be made to retrieve them from the minister's phone so that they can be presented in court and included in the pandemic public inquiry. She says these missing messages are vital evidence and bereaved families deserve nothing less than the whole truth. As I say, the government has said it is making efforts to retrieve those messages, but it's now got the Information Commissioner looking into the matter too.
Ben, thank you. More on that breaking news that Andrew Cuomo, the Governor of New York, has resigned. He's just finished a televised address. He faced a whole barrage of sexual harassment and misconduct allegations, which he denied. Here's part of what he had to say.
And doing the right thing is doing the right thing for you. Because as we say, it's not about me, it's about we. Kathy Hochul, my lieutenant governor, is smart and competent. This transition must be seamless. We have a lot going on. I'm very worried about the Delta variant, and so should you be. But she can come up to speed quickly, and my resignation will be effective in 14 days.
Simon Marks will have more in just a moment. First, the headlines. Tim Humphrey. Now, more on the breaking news about the Governor of New York. Reporting live, our US correspondent Simon Marks.
Well, Eddie, this has been an absolute bombshell in the course of the last few minutes here in the United States. The Governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, who at dawn this morning still seemed to be the last man in America who thought he could possibly survive as Governor of New York, following the publication of that independent investigation 1 week ago that accused him of sexually harassing 11 women, including even a state trooper on his own security detail. Well, when the governor started speaking to reporters today, it looked like we were in for another ritual series of denials of any kind of inappropriate behaviour and an insistence that he was going to continue toughing things out. This is how his appearance began.
In my mind, I've never crossed the line with anyone. But I didn't realize the extent to which the line has been redrawn. There are generational and cultural shifts that I just didn't fully appreciate. And I should have. No excuses.
For the second successive week then, Governor Cuomo sounding like a man who was dismissing the allegations against him and almost portraying himself as a bit of a social dinosaur who, as a result of the publication of that report a week ago and the threat of impeachment proceedings and criminal proceedings hanging over him, suddenly had understood the way in which he was supposed to be working in his office. But then there was a corner turn in the speech where he started warning that the investigations against him, which he said were politically motivated, were going to spark a process that would cost taxpayers millions of dollars and would brutalize people. And that was when he dropped the bombshell news that he's decided to go.
New York tough means New York loving. And I love New York. And I love you. And everything I have ever done has been motivated by that love. And I would never want to be unhelpful in any way. And I think that given the circumstances, the best way I can help now is if I step aside and let government get back to governing. And therefore, that's what I'll do. Because I work for you. And doing the right thing is doing the right thing for you.
He is not stepping down immediately. He says he will hand power over to the Lieutenant Governor of New York, essentially his deputy, Kathy Hochul, in 14 days' time. She will make history, and there's some symmetry in all of this because she will become the first woman ever to be sworn in as the Governor of New York State. But that announcement ends Andrew Cuomo's political career. It extinguishes any possible talk of any remaining political ambitions, including presidential aspirations that he may have coveted. The turning point in all of this, I think, came over the weekend when his longtime aide, Marisa DeRosa, resigned. She, like Governor Cuomo, also targeted in that report by the independent investigator, accused of retaliating against women who came forward to complain, and in at least one incident of suppressing complaints about the governor's behaviour. This also delivers political relief to President Joe Biden here in Washington because, of course, last week he called for Governor Cuomo's resignation and that call appeared to have fallen on deaf ears. That was becoming an embarrassment for Joe Biden, as we discussed on Friday's edition of American Week on this programme. You know, who's running the Democratic Party if it's not Joe Biden? So this clears a bit of embarrassing underbrush away at the White House. It does not, however, clear the way for Andrew Cuomo to avoid possible criminal indictment and more civil legal action. Remember that one of his accusers has already filed a civil lawsuit against him, and others have indicated that they are preparing to do precisely the same. And it may well have been that the governor recognised that between the threat of legal action and the inevitability of his impeachment in the State Assembly in Albany, he was left this Tuesday morning with no further options but to throw in the towel. But throw it in he has done. He's given himself 2 more weeks, perhaps to wrap up some other projects in New York that he wants to finalise before he leaves office. I think there will be some questions about whether he should be staying in office for 2 more weeks or whether he should be leaving immediately. But this is an astonishing development in New York State and a seismic great moment for the Democratic Party, given the leading role that Andrew Cuomo played in that party even a year ago as he battled against COVID-19. At the time, New York, of course, the global epicenter for the pandemic. Very big bit of news here today, Eddie.
Simon Marks reporting live, and Simon is back this Friday on this programme, every Friday at 4:45 with Simon Marks's American Week. You can be pretty sure there'll be more of this. Whenever we've talked about universities in recent months, we've heard from students pretty fed up with online lectures and wondering why they're paying all that money in tuition fees. Well, they seem to have found an ally in the shape of England's Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson. Reporting for LBC Live from UCL in London, our senior reporter, Matthew Thompson.
You might have thought, Eddie, that those fed-up students you mentioned would have nothing to worry about now that most COVID restrictions have ended. But a number of the country's top universities have admitted that they do not intend to return to full in-person learning in the autumn, in spite of government guidance urging them to do so. The likes of UCL here, LSE, also in London, Imperial, Cardiff University, have all said they intend to keep lectures online, and students are starting to revolt. We can reveal that within days of being set up, a petition at UCL to restore in-person learning has the required number of signatures for a full student body vote. That would put significant pressure on the university to change tack. I spoke with the petition's organiser, who didn't want to give his name, but who set out a number of key reasons why, in his view and the view of many of his fellow students, in-person learning is an essential part of the university experience.
There are many students who suffer from the pitfalls of online learning. For example, that if they have these pre-recorded lectures, they only end up doing the actual watching of the lectures 1 week before the exams. But having that appointment in your schedule where you actually have to attend a lecture is beneficial. We also feel that there's a social aspect that's somewhat lost with online learning. After a lecture, you go with a mate to a coffee shop and you discuss the lecture, or you discuss something that you perhaps missed, and as a result you can also consolidate your knowledge. And in the end also, you attend universities, for example, to some degree because you also want to have the opportunity to engage with these top-end researchers. And you definitely lose out on that with online lectures. Some students also believe that the fees are not necessarily reflective of what online learning presents as an opportunity.
And that last point, Eddie, is an important one. Should students still be expected to pay thousands of pounds in tuition fees that, let's remember, many will be paying back for most of their working lives, if they're not being offered full in-person teaching? And this morning, the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, appeared to suggest that in the government's view, they should not.
Universities are autonomous institutions. Our guidance is clear, our direction is clear, and we do expect all universities, unless there's unprecedented reasons, to be moving back to the situation of actually delivering lessons, lectures face-to-face. I think if universities are not delivering what students expect, then actually they shouldn't be charging the full fees of what they're done.
Now, is that a hint that the government could be heading for a clash with the higher education sector? Possibly. It's certainly a shift in tone from last year, when ministers were still insisting that online learning didn't necessarily mean a reduction in quality and shouldn't necessarily mean a reduction in fees.
Matthew Thompson reporting from UCL in London. Still to come in the next few minutes, we'll talk about Prince Andrew, test and trace, and coming next, the business news, after the headlines from Tim. What really happens after people get pinged? Rachel Venables has exclusive news in just a moment. First, the LBC Business Update. Ben Kumar from 7 Investment Management. Ben, night after night, month after month, we've sat here talking about what a dreadful state the airline industry is in. But you've got news of an airline planning to set up in the coming days. Are they mad?
Well, they're not mad. They just are based in the US. This is JetBlue, sort of low-cost US airline. Not many of us would have heard of them here in the UK. What they're going to do is open a London to New York route. Now, the low-cost airline challenges on that over the past few years, Norwegian, etc., all went bust. And JetBlue have seen the chance to put it in place. The problem at the moment, given that the route launches tomorrow, Wednesday, tomorrow night, is that UK citizens can't travel to the US at the moment. So while they might have a lot of people coming over from America here, they won't be able to make the return flight if they're from the UK. Still, more competition on a route I'm sure lots of people would want to fly, probably a good thing.
Something else often seen as a bellwether of the economy is car sales. What's the latest?
Yeah, so used car sales doubled in the last 3 months compared to the same period last year. Of course, people couldn't go out and buy cars in quite the same way this time last year due to lockdown, but sales are still about 7% higher than in 2019. People have been going out and changing car for various reasons, part of which might just be having a little bit of extra cash on hand, part of which might be the need to drive a bit more. You know, if you're not going to take public transport everywhere, you might need to upgrade your car. And part of which is the fact that there were fewer new cars being delivered. So if you were in desperate need, you had to go and buy a used car. We'll see if it continues. But the big problem I would mention is that there aren't enough used electric cars. Only 1% of all used cars are electric. So if you want to shift that away from petrol, we still need to see a lot of people buying new electric cars.
Ben, thank you.
LBC Business Update.
With Direct Line Landlord Insurance. Come direct for landlord insurance.
5:39 on LBC. What happens after people get pinged by the Test and Trace app? Tonight we have the results of an exclusive survey for LBC. Reporting live, our correspondent Rachel Venables.
Eddie, we know that through the summer in particular, the so-called pingdemic has blighted parts of the economy and really hampered people's lives, with millions being told by an app on their phone to self-isolate after coming near someone who tested positive for COVID-19. This is as part of the £37 billion Test and Trace programme. Now, the latest numbers show just shy of 400,000 people getting pinged in a single week in England and Wales, admittedly a sizable drop from the week before, but now in an opinion poll carried out for LBC of more than 1,000 adults, we can see the flaws in the system. Firstly, Eddie, we asked people if they'd ever had the app. 50% said yes, and if they'd ever been pinged. And of those who said yes again, fewer than half told us they self-isolated for the full amount of time when told to. Just 46% saying they followed the rules. That is far less as well than the 60% compliance the government expects. Now, the data then went further, Eddie, asking for specific details. 12% of these people saying they still left the house after being pinged to go to spaces like cafes, restaurants and the cinema. 15% still went to work. And this is the one that really surprised me. 12% said they still saw clinically vulnerable friends or relatives. Now, Dr. Deepti Gurdasani is an epidemiologist and senior lecturer at Queen Mary University in London. And she told me there's been a fundamental flaw in the Test and Trace system from the start.
Several experts have put forward the view that one of the reasons with the problem is that people aren't being supported adequately with isolation. And there are several studies that show people are motivated to actually get tested and isolate, but many of them can't afford to do so because we have the lowest financial support for isolation across the whole OECD. And this is a problem that hasn't been addressed despite billions actually going into the test, trace and, isolate system, the private system, as well as the app.
Now, we also asked people who had been pinged if they went on to test positive, if the self-isolation alert really worked in stopping them from spreading the virus. 1 in 10 of them did go on to test positive. Dr. Gurdasani told me that's actually better than what she expected. But what did concern her was the 27% of respondents who told us they had deleted the app or switched off Bluetooth contact tracing, while another 15% told us they were planning to do that by the end of August, by which time, of course, we know double-vaxxed contacts won't have to self-isolate. Now, she said the public messaging around isolation has been all wrong from the government.
The messaging is very much that isolation is an inconvenience. In fact, our government is talking about on the 16th of August removing isolation for contacts of cases who are vaccinated, which is completely opposite to what other countries are now doing with the Delta variant. The CDC actually released measures among vaccinated people, removing mask mandates, etc. And they've had to go back because their data and our data now shows that even if you're vaccinated, you have a fairly high risk of getting infected. And if you do get infected, you're as likely to transmit as somebody who's unvaccinated. And all of that suggests that what the government is doing is not based in any sort of evidence. But unfortunately, this is the messaging that's getting across to people, which is, if I'm vaccinated, Why do I need to isolate? Boris Johnson isn't isolating.
Now, the Department for Health, Eddie, responded to this data by urging the public to continue using the NHS COVID-19 app as restrictions lift. And we know that cases in the community remain very high. They've said that new data shows over 50,000 cases were averted in the first 3 weeks of July, thanks to the app, with up to 2,000 cases prevented a day. Also pointing out that they brought in changes on August the 2nd, which means that fewer close contacts would be advised to self-isolate through the app after they dropped the exposure time from 5 days to 2. But our data, of course, are a worrying example of how few people are following the rules, with many of them, it seems, deleting this app, really growing quite fed up, it seems, with the restrictions.
Rachel Venables reporting. Prince Andrew denies that he sexually abused a 17-year-old, but the woman who made the accusation is challenging that with a civil case filed in New York. Virginia Giuffre says she was sexually assaulted by the Queen's son in London and in New York. Juliet Wells is a barrister specialising in extradition and public international law at Temple Garden Chambers. Thank you very much for joining us. What are the legal niceties here? What happens next, the case having been filed?
Hi, Eddie. Well, so far as I'm aware, what's happened in the last couple of days is that Ms. Giuffre has filed her claim with the US federal court in New York. So we're right at the beginning of what is likely to be quite a protracted legal process. What will need to happen next is she'll need to serve her claim on Prince Andrew in this country. And it is at that point that he'll need to start engaging with the US legal process. But we're looking here at a process that could take many months. What will happen after that is there will begin the process of evidence gathering and preparation for trial. And that trial date could be some way off, particularly when you consider that there is, the ongoing criminal prosecution of Miss Maxwell in New York. And the US courts are likely to be sensitive to the crossover between the two cases. And it may be that this civil claim of Miss Giuffre's has to wait in the wings for some time, whilst that prosecution plays itself out.
What are the key factors that will decide whether or not this case comes to trial?
It's likely, first and foremost, to be whether or not Prince Andrew's legal team are prepared to settle the case out of court. Many civil cases end up not getting as far as trial and settling outside of court, and whether or not Prince Andrew's legal team think that that is the right course of action will relate not just to the merits of the claim and how strong they consider the evidence against Prince Andrew is, but also strategic considerations and what the public relations angle is likely to be.
Is it likely he will end up appearing in court? What about extradition?
So extradition at the moment is not on the table. The US can make an extradition request of the United Kingdom in certain circumstances, but they don't apply here. There would need to be criminal charges filed in the US against Prince Andrew, and those would be criminal charges which would need to potentially carry a sentence of imprisonment. And at the moment, that doesn't seem likely, but it's certainly not what is at the core of this case, which is a civil claim for compensation.
Thank you. Juliet Wells, barrister specialising in extradition and public international law at Temple Garden Chambers. 5:46 on LBC. Tim has more news. Taliban fighters have made huge gains in recent days, seizing a 6th provincial capital in Afghanistan. That advance is causing a lot of soul-searching in the UK and the US about what's been achieved by the invasion in 2001, all the lives lost and money spent. Questions too about the debt the UK and US owe to Afghan interpreters who risked their lives helping the military for 20 years. A group of more than 40 former military chiefs, commanders and diplomats wrote to Boris Johnson last month to call for greater generosity with the government's resettlement scheme. There are problems too for interpreters who help the United States. Zia Ghafouri is chief executive and founder of the Interpreting Freedom Foundation, a non-profit organisation providing support for interpreters integrating into the US. Zia worked for 14 years as an interpreter for US Special Forces in Afghanistan. Thanks very much for joining us. You were 18 years old when you joined the US military as an interpreter in 2002. It was your first job. Why did you take it on?
Thank you, sir, for having me over here. Yes, I had the dream to fight against all those guys that they were destroying Afghanistan. And I was a child when I was seeing the Taliban took over, and they were beating male and female around the country. So I was like in third grade when I saw the situation. So I had it in my mind, and I said, when I grow up, I will fight against them.
And you did. You were very much part of the effort. Tell me about your job and what it entailed.
Yeah, I used to work with the U.S. Army and U.S. Army Special Forces for 14 years. So I have been in all kinds of missions in high-value targets. So also we train the Afghan commandos and Afghan Rangers and ANA, like Afghan National Army, Afghan police, and also we are getting those people in the front line and fighting shoulder to shoulder with them and destroying all those Al-Qaeda and Taliban headquarters.
What was that like?
That was like, we were like very feeling good because of what they have done for the country. So all the people wanted a peace in Afghanistan, and all those innocent people were happy that we had like 42 countries for the security of Afghanistan and to destroy Taliban and Al-Qaeda from the Afghanistan. But unfortunately, we couldn't, and they left Afghanistan by themselves.
You arrived in the United States in 2014. What was that like?
When I arrived in 2014, so I just dropped off from the plane and with my 3 kids. So I didn't have any place to go. So I had everything in my pocket. I had money, cash, everything, but I didn't have a documentation because I just arrived there and I couldn't able to get a place for my kids and my family. So I contact one of a couple organizations to help me out to get my documentation or find me a place that I could live. So they took me to homeless shelter. So I didn't know what homeless shelter looks like. So they took me with my 3 kids to the homeless shelter. Then I found out it's not a place for me and for my kids to stay over here. So from that day, when my teammates found out, my special forces team found out, they took me out of the homeless shelter and brought me to their home. And from there, I start my life with my family. Then I figure out I need to start a non-profit organization to help all those interpreters that they left behind. And when they are coming over here to help them out.
How common was your experience to do all of that work for years, to be crucial to the effort the US was making, and to put your own life in danger, and the lives of your families, of course? How common is it for that experience to end up in a homeless shelter when you get to the US?
Yes, well, when I had got to the homeless shelter, so I look at it like, okay, in the past 14 years, what I have done for both countries, so for Afghanistan and United States, so is it the place for me? Did I deserve this place with my children to live? So that gave me a hard time, and it still it's hurting me when I remember those days. I couldn't even look into my kids' eyes. So that moment that they took me down there. But the good thing was the teammates that I had, my commander, he found out and he took me out from there.
But it took that personal involvement of people you knew to help you. I wonder why the American government didn't do more, and what's happening for other people in your position.
It's the problem is still the same. That most of those guys who are coming over here in the United States or other countries that they are going, they're starting from zero. They have nothing. They have nothing. Like, they cannot bring their whole life that they set it in Afghanistan. So they are coming over here with just their clothes and with their family. That's it. They cannot bring everything that they built in the past 20 years that they have been in Afghanistan. So they are struggling. They are struggling because they don't know the culture. They don't know where to go find a job. They don't know where to go get their license to drive. So we have all those kind of issues. And as I mentioned before, I said that was the reason that I started this nonprofit organization to help all those Afghans, Iraqis that they are coming to the United States and any state of in the United States. I could able to help them and support them through my organization.
Just finally, I mentioned the advances the Taliban has been making in Afghanistan in recent days. What do you think of what's happening in your country?
So right now, the situation is getting worse and worse. And the thing is, like in the past 20 years, 42 countries with a high technology, with high value, like the best armies in the world we had over there, from UK, from United States, from Canada, from all around these countries. They were involved in this fight to finish all these Al-Qaeda and Taliban. But today they hand over Afghanistan back to those people. So we give all those sacrifices for Afghanistan and United States and all the NATO forces. So it's still, that was like for nothing. It looks like to me that was for nothing.
Very good to see you. Thank you for talking to us. Zia Ghafouri, Chief Executive and Founder of the Interpreting Freedom Foundation. We devoted a lot of time last week and the week before on the programme to talking about the latest figures on drugs deaths, first in Scotland and then in England and Wales. On this programme and others like it over many years, you probably heard it, you maybe been part of it, we have debated drugs policy. Questions of legalisation, decriminalisation, or making existing laws tougher. We're going to talk about it again now because a new voice has been added to the debate. Someone calling for a fresh look at drugs policy and urging today's political leaders to have a rethink on their get tough on drugs policies. It's particularly interesting because the voice that's been added is someone who was a political leader, William Hague, who led the Conservative Party between 1997 and 2001. He's written an article for The Times today, and he has a lot to say about drugs. And because this is a new voice in the debate, I'm going to take a bit of time. I thought you might want to hear some of William Hague's ideas before we get into the conversation. He says this: two truths about this issue seem clear. The first is that it's become a massive social problem. The annual deaths represent tens of thousands more people trapped in addiction and heading for the same fate. The victims match closely with child poverty and areas of deprivation. More than a third of people in our prisons are there because of drugs, usually stealing to feed their habits. The supply chains, now dominated by county lines, bring violence and further death to young people, vast profits for organised crime, and an endless distraction for the police. The second truth, awkward though it may be for those of us who always wanted to get tougher, is that we will never suppress the supply of drugs while the demand goes on. The supply of hard drugs is so resilient that all the border closures of the pandemic haven't hindered it. So pervasive that 15% of those actually in prison test positive in random drug tests. A review for the government by Dame Carol Black stated that enforcement crackdowns have little effect on overall drug supply, and that even if the police, border force and the National Crime Agency were sufficiently resourced, it's not clear they'd be able to bring about a sustained reduction in supply. All of this, the words of William Hague, and I want to just read another key section. This is William Hague's suggestion of a possible solution, having identified what he believes is the problem. He says this: a rare bright spot has been Portugal, which since 2001 has pursued a very different policy. Drug deaths there have fallen and are currently less than a tenth of the UK figure. So what did the Portuguese do? In the words of the Johns Hopkins Lancet Commission of 2016, they decriminalised minor drug offences with significant financial savings, less incarceration, significant public health benefits, and no significant increase in drug use. They reclassified the use, possession and purchase of drugs for individual consumption as misdemeanours. Those caught with drugs appear before a committee which gives a reprimand, a fine or orders treatment. In short, they moved from seeing drug use as a criminal issue to a health issue, achieving a crucial change of culture that brings all relevant agencies and local authorities into working together to rescue the worst cases. Portugal has not legalised drugs and still punishes drug trafficking, but after decriminalisation, all major indicators in a variety of studies have improved, including an 18% fall in the total cost to society after 11 years. By 2010, the number of drug offenders sent to criminal courts had halved. Less law enforcement work will have helped to pay for better treatments. Might this not be worth a try? Asks William Hague. And one final paragraph, and this is part of what I want to hear from you about tonight. Might this not be worth a try? Apparently not, according to the party leaders. As deaths reach record levels, Keir Starmer thinks the government's policy on drugs is roughly right. Boris Johnson says he doesn't want to decriminalise drugs because they ruin lives. He favours a tough approach. But, William Hague says, there's nothing tough about maintaining our own instinctive desire to crack down on a problem while not learning from other countries, nor about criminalising addicts for their health condition, trapping them in desperate cycles of dependence and crime. It may be a familiar argument, but this is a new voice, isn't it? William Hague, former Conservative Party leader. Is he right? And if he is, why does it take people to leave high office for them to say these things about drugs? 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850 and tweet at LBC. And by the way, I'm especially keen to hear from you if you are a Conservative, either by instinct or by loyalty to that party. Because if you are a Conservative, you are instinctively opposed to radical change. I wonder what you think of your former leader's ideas on drugs. But whatever your party, get in touch. 0345 6060 973. We welcome to the programme two people with differing views. Crispin Blunt, Conservative MP for Reigate, who co-chairs the all-party group on drug policy reform, and Steve Turner, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Cleveland Police. Steve Turner, first, if I may. I wanted to take the time to read out some of William Hague's views in detail. Having done that, what do you think of his views on this?
I think William speaks a lot of sense. I can understand where he's coming from, and I see the angle he's written. I've also done quite a lot of research into places like Portugal who have seen a drop. Where I do disagree with him, though, is what he doesn't talk about, and what many people in favour of decriminalising drugs don't talk about, is the impact it has on young people and the message it sends to young people. And when we talk about decriminalising it, do we say, right, we'll decriminalise it for everybody, or is there an age limit on it? So do we only decriminalise it for the over 18s, which is what they've done in Portugal? So then do we create another problem where we start creating gangs and a culture where young people are then criminalised for getting drugs? So there's so much to do. And I think that the thing for me, the one thing that nobody really talks about when they talk about decriminalising drugs is the benefits they've seen in places like Portugal where it's tried that actually don't come from the decriminalisation. They come from the investment into rehabilitation, in stronger sentencing for those that are trafficking drugs. So if you're caught with more than a personal supply of drugs in Portugal, you can go to jail for up to 14 years. That type of harsher measure in our country probably wouldn't get the backing of lots of political people within the country, and certainly lots of members of the public. But those are the things they've done in Portugal because the situation they found themselves in 20 years ago was so horrendous, where basically almost 1 in every 100 people was addicted to heroin, that they've had to take that stance. So I think if we're going to have a conversation, what we need to say is, let's put the infrastructure in place. Let's have a conversation about how we rehabilitate people, how we support people who want to come off drugs. Let's have a conversation about prison places and what we would need, because the other thing about Portugal is in the first 5 years after decriminalisation, murders went up, trafficking went up, arrests went up. So we've got to say, what are we going to do with that? And then if we can start to look at those things and have a conversation and put that infrastructure in place, and then say, right, and then what do we do about the addicts that come forward? How does our NHS cope? Right? So if we can do those things and we can put those things in place, then maybe it's not decriminalisation we should be talking about. It's about what we do to fix those problems in the first place without telling our young people that it's okay to take drugs.
Thank you. Stay right there if you would. That's Steve Turner, Police and Crime Commissioner for Cleveland Police, and Crispin Blunt is listening to all of that, Conservative MP for Reigate, co-chairs the all-party parliamentary group on drug policy reform. And I want to hear your response to Steve Turner, but I suppose principally, what are your thoughts on William Hague saying this at all?
Well, it's not actually news from William. He said it a couple of years ago, actually just before the think tank I chair, the Conservative Drug Policy Reform Group Limited, as well as I co-chair the all-party parliamentary group, was launched, and he wrote quite a similar piece in a Sunday paper. So I don't think this is a new revelation. He's writing it because the recent figures are the worst they've ever been, and sadly, Steve Turner is a newly elected Police and Crime Commissioner for the part of England where the death rate is the worst it is in England. The figures are even worse in Scotland, and they are worse in Scotland by a margin of about 3 from the point at which Portugal decided they needed to take a new approach in 2001. And Steve is absolutely right that you need a system approach here. You can't just do this on an approach one part of the problem. It needs to be comprehensive. I would hope that Steve would be part of trying to evaluate that situation. We've got new political control in Teesside and quite a lot of the key posts there, and I'm hoping that we could see the value of change there. If people all got together, the public health, police, and arrest, really to see if we can make this work and put the resources into the part of England where we are most affected by the drugs policy and its outcomes, and see if we can make things seriously better.
Steve Turner, should the starting point here, to pick up on Crispin Blunt's point, not be the drugs deaths, the record drugs deaths, and the fact that the record keeps being broken every year, and say, well, clearly the policy isn't working, and that needs to be the starting point?
I think you've got to have, to be honest, you've got to have multiple starting points. It is always tragic when somebody dies, and I see firsthand in my role that families that are devastated through drugs. But my personal opinion, and I'm not on some moralistic crusade to say drugs should always be illegal or anything like that. It's more about what decriminalising doesn't do is do anything towards stopping the supply. It doesn't stop new customers coming along. So for every addict we support and every person we help, without actually taking action against those peddlers on the corner, they're just going to bring new customers along. And it's young people as well, don't forget, because this is what we're saying. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. You cannot address our drug problem in this country. So I agree.
Let
me bring Crispin Blunt back in, if I may, Steve Turner. Just 1 second.
Yes,
Crispin Blunt.
The point there, of course, is that we have placed the users in alliance with the suppliers. And indeed, the evidence is that we have made them their sales force and their marketing team. Those are the people who are the peddlers on the streets. They're the drug users. Now, if we can find a way of breaking that chain and removing from the criminal cartels their marketing force and their sales force, which is principally the most problematic users, the people who have no choice but to sell drugs in order to find their supply. And then you've got the class of people who aren't even capable of doing that, and they're the people who steal in order to find the money. And they're responsible for this horrendous amount of crime in the UK. If we can address those issues, then I think we can make a really big impact in communities where we can then bring a terrifying rate of drug use then back under control by getting them treated as a health issue.
And just on the politics of this, Crispin Blunt, as a politician who's taken a keen interest in all of this for a long time, why does it take politicians to stand down from high office for them to say these things? Is it very difficult? Do you think some of the current leaders might agree with William Hague but feel if they say anything else, it's going to be political suicide?
It's a difficult area, and William referred to it in his article, but because in the 2000 Conservative Party conference, when Anne Widdecombe was a Shadow Home Secretary and came forward with a proposal for sort of on-the-spot cannabis fines, I think was what was submitted, it then turned out that a third of the Shadow Cabinet had taken cannabis at some point or another. And that there is a problem because politicians represent the society probably reasonably fairly, and there's a very wide degree of drug use in society now. And of course, historically, most people will have had some connection with illegal drugs, as we found out in the last Conservative leadership election. So this is a point of personal vulnerability for politicians. So my advice, is don't answer the question. You have a duty, you have a wider duty to public policy. And public policy needs to be based on the evidence. And the evidence from all around the world is that we could do a great deal better than we're doing now. And the United Kingdom is now becoming a European outlier in how badly we're doing and how many people are dying.
Thank you both. Greatly appreciate you taking time to start the conversation. That's Crispin Blunt, Conservative MP for Reigate, and Steve Turner, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Cleveland Police. It's an interesting piece by William Hague. Whether or not you agree with his point of view, I just think it's compelling that he should have stuck his head above the parapet like this. What do you think of what he said? What do you think of the fact he said it? Would you like to hear current political leaders saying similar things? Maybe you vehemently disagree with the whole idea. But it's a new voice in the debate, and particularly keen to hear from you if you are instinctively a Conservative. 0345 6060 973. Tim has the news. The former Conservative Party leader William Hague has written an article today in which he bemoans the record drugs deaths in this country and says things need to change. He calls on political leaders to have a look at Portugal and suggests we should at least be considering Portugal's experiment and using it in this country. What do you say? 0345 6060 973. By the way, we will hear from Portugal directly between now and 7 o'clock. But let me know where you are with this, and particularly keen to hear from you if you are instinctively a Conservative. What's it like hearing a man who is Conservative through and through saying these things, a former leader of your party? Should current political leaders be at least thinking in this way? Pete says, well done, William Hague, and shame on the major party leaders. Johnson won't decriminalise not because it costs lives, but because it costs votes. Gangs, prisons and a murderous culture and underworld thrive on the current situation. If we're serious, we need courage. No political leaders have that. We need a sea change. Portugal did that and turned the tide. You can text 84850 and call 0345 6060 973. Lee is in Bromley. Hi, Lee. How are you?
Hello. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous.
Well, no, you've got me nervous, and I was fine before, Lee. Let's just both take a couple of deep breaths together. You and me, okay? You ready?
Okay,
Okay,
yeah.
and breathe in. No, you breathed out too quickly. Now you're just going to hyperventilate, and then it'll be even worse. Anyway, that wasn't why you called in. Tell me how you are.
I've never called in before, but I'm an avid listener of LBC and yourself, and I felt compelled to call in because of my upbringing, specifically to do with my mother, who actually passed away a couple of years ago. And I think William Hague has it completely right about it being a public health issue in this country. You know, it's the underworld and the criminal gangs, but then there's also the vulnerable people that get entangled in this web, which comes from a sense of vulnerability, and it can be also due to mental health issues.
Tell me about your mum, Lee. Why was she when you were growing up?
My mum was someone who